Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this special Academic English AI deep dive. We are incredibly happy to have you listening today.
We really are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you are an intermediate English learner looking to take that next step in your fluency, you have definitely found the perfect place to be. We've designed this specific deep dive around a really fascinating truth about language learning.
It's a truth that catches a lot of people off guard, I think.
Exactly. We often spend years learning how to discuss complex academic subjects or global politics or economics, but then we completely freeze when someone asks us how we make our morning coffee.
Right.
So today, we are going to explore how native speakers truly talk in their actual everyday lives.
It is a brilliant focus for today. The language of daily life is the ultimate secret to speaking English naturally and confidently.
It really is.
When you think about it, the majority of human existence is not spent giving formal presentations.
No, definitely not.
It is spent navigating morning traffic, deciding what to eat for dinner, and trying to, get away from our phone screens at night. If you can talk about those normal, everyday habits, the small routines that make up your day, you will sound incredibly natural to any native speaker.
And that's the goal.
Exactly. Our mission today is to help you build that specific, practical vocabulary.
To accomplish this, we have a fantastic source text to explore. We're going to analyze a transcript from a YouTube video created by the Leo English podcast.
It's a great source.
In this transcript, two speakers, Emma and Jack, sit down and have a completely unscripted, natural conversation about their daily routines.
Yeah.
They cover absolutely everything, from the very second they open their eyes in the morning to the moment they finally fall asleep at night.
What makes their conversation so valuable for us to analyze is the universal relatability of it all. Every single person listening to us right now, no matter where you live in the world, has some kind of morning routine.
We all do.
You all have an evening routine. You all have chores you dislike. By breaking down Emma and Jack's conversation, we can extract the exact phrases native speakers use to describe these shared human experiences. It really is a masterclass in the language of the everyday.
So let's just jump right into the very beginning of their day. When we look at the transcript, Emma and Jack discuss the very first action they take when they wake up.
And it's a very revealing action.
Yes, it is. They both confess to a very modern and admittedly somewhat negative habit. The very first thing they do is reach for their phones.
They are very honest about it, which is refreshing. Emma says, "First I check my phone. It's a bad habit, I know."
I think we can all relate to that.
Completely. And Jack completely relates to her. He says, "I always check my phone first thing."
Oh, that phrase right there.
Yes, there is a crucial piece of everyday English right there. Notice the phrase Jack uses, first thing. Native speakers use this phrase constantly to mean the absolute first action taken, usually in the morning, before anything else happens.
First thing.
Right. He doesn't even get out of bed. He doesn't stretch. He doesn't drink water. He grabs his phone, first thing.
I wonder how many of our listeners do exactly the same thing. You open your eyes, and before your brain is even fully awake, you are looking at a glowing screen.
It's almost automatic now.
It is such a shared experience. But after that initial screen time, they actually have to get out of bed. And looking at their wake-up timetables, there's a distinct contrast between the two of them.
A very sharp contrast.
Emma mentions that she wakes up at 7 a.m. on normal weekdays. However, she notes that sometimes she has to wake up even earlier if she has an early meeting at her office.
That 7 a.m. wake-up is a very standard schedule for the modern corporate world. But Jack's schedule is slightly different, and his reasoning for it is fascinating.
He wakes up earlier, right?
He does. Jack wakes up at a strict 6:30 a.m. every single day. When Emma asks him why he forces himself out of bed so early, his answer gives us a profound insight into how people try to manage their daily stress.
What does he say?
Jack explains that he intentionally wakes up early because he likes to have time for a proper breakfast. He specifically says, "I don't like to rush in the morning."
I don't like to rush. That is such an evocative phrase. Can we break down what it really feels like to rush in English? Feels like more than just moving quickly.
It definitely is more than just speed. To rush means to do something very quickly, specifically because you do not have enough time. And it almost always carries a feeling of anxiety or panic.
Like a physical stress.
Exactly. When you rush in the morning, your heart rate is up, you might spill your coffee on your shirt, you are running to catch a bus, and your mind is stressed before the workday has even begun.
Nobody wants to start their day like that.
No. So Jack wakes up at 6:30 a.m. specifically to build a buffer of time. He creates a relaxed morning environment to avoid that terrible, stressful rushing sensation.
That makes total sense. By avoiding the rush, he gets to enjoy what sounds like a very peaceful morning. And that brings us to a major topic in their conversation, the breakfast debate.
Yes, the breakfast debate.
Because Jack gives himself that extra 30 minutes by waking up early, he eats a surprisingly healthy, substantial breakfast. He talks about eating eggs and toast, and sometimes he adds fresh fruit or yogurt. He really takes his time with
It
it.
treats it like a real meal.
He does. Emma, on the other hand, represents a lifestyle that I think a lot of busy people will recognize.
She certainly does. Emma tells Jack that she usually skips breakfast entirely.
For our listeners, let's highlight that word, skip.
Oh, good idea. To skip something means to intentionally pass over it or decide not to do it. You might skip a chapter in a book or skip a class or, like Emma, skip a meal.
You just don't do it.
Right. She skips breakfast because, unlike Jack, she simply does not have the time. She relies heavily on coffee to get her through those early hours. Jack tries to offer some gentle advice, telling her that her body needs actual food, but Emma is completely dedicated to that morning coffee habit.
I'm sure many listeners are nodding their heads right now, drinking their own coffee.
Yeah.
But there is a really interesting shift that happens in their conversation when they start talking about the weekend.
Everything changes on the weekend.
It really does. During the Monday through Friday work week, Emma is just surviving on caffeine. But on Saturday and Sunday, her entire relationship with morning food changes. She completely upgrades her breakfast.
She goes all out.
She talks about taking the time to make pancakes, frying eggs, and cooking bacon. She uses this great phrase to describe it. She calls it all the good stuff.
All the good stuff. That is a wonderful, natural idiom.
Let's explain that one for the listeners.
It is a casual way to describe things that are high quality, delicious, or highly desirable, especially things you might not normally allow yourself to have.
Like bacon and pancakes.
Exactly. During a stressful Wednesday morning, she doesn't have time for the good stuff. She just needs fuel. But Saturday morning breakfast becomes an event. It becomes a treat.
And Jack is right there with her on that point. He mentions that having a nice long breakfast is actually one of his absolute favorite things about a Saturday morning.
It really highlights how our language and our daily routines dramatically shift when we transition from the high-stress environment of the work week into the slower, more relaxed pace of the weekend.
But before we get to the weekend, these two still have to actually get to their jobs. Let's look at how they talk about their morning travel.
The word they use, and the word native speakers use constantly, is the commute.
Commute.
Yes. A commute is the regular journey you take from your home to your workplace and then back again at the end of the day. It functions as both a noun, like my commute is terrible, and a verb, like I commute by train.
So what is Emma's commute like?
Emma tells Jack that she leaves her apartment for work around 8:15 a.m. She takes the city bus, and her commute takes about 30 minutes.
Jack's commute is quite different. He drives his own car to work, and his drive is only about 20 minutes, so he has a slightly faster journey.
He does.
But to me, the most intriguing part of this section of our chat isn't the transportation method itself. It is how they choose to use that specific window of time.
It says a lot about them.
I think this is a great moment for our listeners to reflect on their own habits. How do you spend your commute? Because Emma and Jack have completely opposite strategies for their travel time.
They really do. Emma mentions that she doesn't own a car, but she actually doesn't mind taking the bus because it allows her to use that 30 minutes productively.
What is she doing on the bus?
She isn't just staring out the window, she is listening to podcasts. She lists a few different types, mentioning news podcasts to stay informed, comedy podcasts to lighten her mood, and sometimes educational shows about history or science.
It is a very active way to use travel time. In fact, it is exactly what our listeners are doing right this second, using their commute or their chore time to engage with an educational deep dive.
It is a fantastic way to turn lost time into learning time.
It really is. But Jack can't really do that, can he?
Not safely.
Because he is navigating traffic in a car, he has a different psychological need in the morning. He tells Emma that he needs something to help him feel alert and awake while he is behind the wheel.
So he avoids the talking programs.
Right. Instead of podcasts, Jack listens to music during his drive. He explicitly says, "It helps me wake up." Two entirely different commutes, using two different forms of audio, but both are trying to optimize that morning journey.
Once that commute is over, they arrive at the office, which leads us into how they navigate the modern workday. There is a classic English idiom that captures this entire lifestyle, the 9 to 5.
The 9 to 5. We use that everywhere.
We do. It refers to the standard, traditional workday that begins at 9 a.m. and concludes at 5 p.m. Even if your specific hours are slightly different, people still call it a 9 to 5 job to describe standard corporate or office work.
And in the transcript, both Emma and Jack mention that their office jobs start right at that traditional 9 a.m. mark.
And the very first actions they take when they sit down at their desks are remarkably universal.
Let me guess. They turn on their computers.
They get to the office, they sit in their chairs, they open their computers and check their emails. Then, immediately after the inbox is clear, they open their digital calendars to see what meetings are scheduled for the day.
That sequence. Checking emails, checking the calendar. It is essentially the foundational ritual of modern office life all over the world.
It is the global language of the workplace. And speaking of checking that calendar, they have a very candid exchange about the reality of office meetings.
People always complain about meetings.
True. Emma asked Jack how many meetings he typically has in a given day. His response is incredibly relatable. He just sighs and says, "Too many."
Too many is the perfect answer. He elaborates and says that he sometimes has 3 or 4 different meetings in a single day.
That takes up half the day.
At least. When you think about a standard 8-hour workday, spending 4 of those hours in meetings leaves very little time to actually do your independent work. Emma completely sympathizes with him. She points out that sitting in meetings all day can be deeply tiring.
There is a specific concept for this in English workplace culture: meeting fatigue.
Meeting fatigue.
Yes. It is the mental exhaustion that comes not from doing physical labor, but from having to sit still, look attentive, and engage in continuous professional conversation hour after hour. It completely drains your cognitive energy.
It really does. This shared frustration with meetings leads Emma and Jack into a remarkably honest discussion about their overall job satisfaction.
This part is very interesting.
Emma straight up asks Jack if he actually likes his job. I love his answer because it isn't overly enthusiastic. Jack says yes, he likes it most of the time, but he readily admits that some days are just highly stressful.
And Emma agrees completely.
She says she generally enjoys her work, but some days are simply difficult to get through.
This is a very important cultural nuance for our listeners to understand. In English-speaking work cultures, you do not have to pretend that everything is perfect all the time.
Right, you don't have to be fake about it.
Exactly. It is perfectly acceptable and actually very normal to admit to your colleagues or friends that your job is difficult or stressful sometimes. Jack summarizes this perfectly when he says, "I think every job has good days and bad days. It is a balanced, mature, and realistic way to communicate about your professional life."
I find that approach very comforting. It takes the pressure off feeling like you have to love every second of your work. Now, because they acknowledge that the work can be stressful and tiring, their conversation highlights the absolute necessity of taking breaks.
They need a way to recharge.
They talk about the habit of taking a short coffee break in the middle of the morning and then another short break in the middle of the afternoon. These are not long lunches. They are just 10 or 15-minute pauses.
But those 10 to 15 minutes are functionally critical to their survival. Jack makes a very strong, definitive statement in their chat. He says, "You can't work for 8 hours straight without a break. No way."
Let's focus on that word, straight.
Yes. I want to highlight the word straight in that sentence for our listeners. When used this way, straight means continuously, consecutively, without any interruption or stopping.
So doing something straight means doing it without a single pause.
Correct. Working 8 hours straight implies staring at a screen from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. without ever blinking. Jack is arguing that this is biologically and mentally impossible for human focus. Those tiny little coffee breaks are the only way to maintain concentration.
And I love his use of the phrase "no way" at the end of that thought.
It adds so much personality.
It does. No way is a fantastic, natural reaction native speakers use to mean absolutely not, or that is impossible. So assuming they survive the meetings and take their coffee breaks, the 8 hours eventually come to an end. It is quitting time.
Finally.
When discussing when the workday officially finishes, we see a little bit of flexibility. Emma notes that her official end time is 5:30 p.m., but she admits she sometimes stays later if she's wrapped up in a busy project. Jack's official end time is 5 p.m.
However, Jack brings up the harsh reality of modern deadlines.
Oh, deadlines.
Yes. He tells Emma that even though he is supposed to leave at 5, he frequently finds himself staying at the office until 6 p.m. if he has deadlines approaching.
Let's make sure that word is clear for our intermediate learners.
A deadline is the exact date or time when a specific task or project absolutely must be finished. If a deadline is looming over you, the official quitting time doesn't matter. You have to stay and finish the work.
You just have to do it.
Both Emma and Jack seem to accept that working a little bit late occasionally is just a normal, unavoidable part of having a career.
It's universal truth, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But eventually, the computer's turned off and they leave the office. This brings us to the great transition of the day, the evening routines and the process of unwinding.
The best part of the day.
Jack gets back in his car, drives his 20 minutes through the evening traffic, and finally arrives back at his apartment. And the very first thing he does when he walks through his front door is something I think almost every single person listening to this deep dive does as well. It is an immediate, almost instinctual act.
You are referring to the wardrobe shift.
Exactly. The wardrobe shift. Jack says to Emma, I usually change into comfortable clothes first. Work clothes are not comfortable.
He's not wrong.
And Emma strongly agrees with him. She says the moment she gets home, she immediately changes out of her office clothes and puts on sweatpants or pajamas.
It's an instant reaction to being home.
Listeners, picture this specific moment in your own life. You walk through the door, you take off those stiff work pants, you take off the shoes that have been hurting your feet all day, and you put on soft, loose sweatpants. It is a glorious feeling.
It truly is a universal feeling of relief. But if we look at it from a psychological perspective, this physical change of clothing serves a deeply important function.
What does it do for the brain?
Changing your clothes acts as a physical signal to your brain that the professional portion of the day is officially over. You are literally taking off the armor you wore to the office.
I love that description, taking off the armor.
It creates a necessary mental boundary between the stress and demands of your public working life and the peace and privacy of your home environment.
It really is the official start of the relaxation process. In fact, Emma explicitly uses a brilliant word to describe this phase of the evening. She says, I need some time to unwind after work.
Unwind, we hear that all the time.
We are going to explore the word unwind in much more detail later in our vocabulary breakdown. But in essence, it means to slowly let go of the day's tension. So how long does this unwinding phase last?
According to their chat, they usually spend about 30 minutes to an hour just sitting on the couch, maybe watching a little bit of TV or scrolling through social media. They do this before they even begin to think about what they're going to eat for dinner.
Which brings up the next major logistical hurdle of the evening, dinner dynamics.
This is always a struggle.
Their conversation reveals two very different approaches to feeding oneself after a long day of work. The primary choice is between cooking a meal from scratch or simply ordering food delivery.
Emma admits that her strategy varies. Sometimes she attempts to cook, but very frequently she orders food. She is remarkably honest and just admits to Jack that she is not a very good cook.
Jack, surprisingly, is on the opposite end of the spectrum. He tells Emma that he genuinely loves cooking.
That takes energy.
It does, but he cooks his own dinner almost every single night because he finds the actual process of chopping vegetables and standing over the stove to be relaxing. When Emma expresses her frustration with her lack of culinary skills, Jack is very encouraging.
What does he tell her?
He tells her that cooking really isn't that difficult if you just keep the recipe simple. He mentions that his typical dinners consist of basic things like pasta or chicken and rice. He doesn't try to make complicated 5-course meals on a Tuesday night.
Keeping it simple is key. This part of the conversation also highlights a significant lifestyle difference, the impact of living alone versus living with someone else.
The roommate dynamic.
Exactly. Jack lives by himself, so his cooking routine is solitary. He only has to worry about feeding himself. Emma, however, lives with a roommate. She mentions that while she might order food during the busy week, on the weekends, she and her roommate will sometimes cook a large meal together.
That sounds fun.
Emma points out a massive benefit to this. Cooking with someone else is not only more socially engaging, but you get to share the physical workload. One person chops the onions while the other boils the water, making the whole process much faster and less exhausting.
Having a roommate definitely has its advantages when it comes to the division of labor. So, what time are these meals actually happening?
According to their discussion, the typical time frame for dinner is somewhere between 7 p.m. and 8 p.m. They note that it might get pushed a little later if they had to stay late at the office or if they got stuck in bad traffic on the commute home.
But notice the specific habit Jack mentions that occurs immediately after he finishes eating his simple chicken and rice. Before he allows himself to sit down and enjoy his evening free time, he cleans up the kitchen.
He doesn't wait.
He doesn't. He washes the pots, he cleans the plates, he wipes down the counters. This is a very intentional behavioral choice. Many people will finish dinner and leave the dirty dishes in the sink, telling themselves they will deal with it tomorrow. but Jack tackles it immediately.
That is smart.
By doing this, he ensures that when he finally sits down on the couch at 8:30 p.m., his free time is truly free. There is no lingering stress of a messy kitchen waiting to ruin his morning the next day.
That is a level of discipline I think we all wish we had.
I definitely need to adopt that habit. Let's move into the next phase of their evening. Once the kitchen is spotless, it is time for free time, hobbies, and what becomes a very real struggle with screen time. When they turn on the television, what exactly are they watching?
We see a clear divide in their entertainment preferences here. Jack tells Emma that he leans towards watching comedy shows, educational documentaries, and occasionally action movies.
And Emma?
Emma's tastes are quite different. She prefers watching intense dramas and various reality TV shows to disconnect from her day.
Emma brings up an interesting social element to this, too. She mentions how much she enjoys watching these drama shows with her roommate. They can talk about the characters and react to the storylines together.
Jack, because he lives alone, admits that he sometimes misses having someone to watch television with.
Emma immediately offers him a great piece of social advice. She tells him, "You should invite friends over. Make it a movie night."
Movie night.
For our intermediate learners, the phrase movie night is a very natural, common expression. It doesn't just mean watching a film. It means intentionally dedicating an entire evening to hosting friends in your home, preparing snacks like popcorn, and enjoying a film as a shared social event.
It is a great way to bring community into your private space, but their evenings are not entirely consumed by television. The conversation also explores how they integrate hobbies and physical exercise into their lives after working all day.
Jack brings up a personal goal he has been working on. He tells Emma that he has been learning how to play the acoustic guitar. He mentions that he has been at it for about 6 months, and he makes sure to practice 2 or 3 times every single week.
I think that detail is so important because it highlights the sheer dedication required to learn any new skill as an adult.
It is so hard.
You cannot just pick up a guitar once a month and expect to play a song. It requires building a consistent routine. It is exactly the same process as learning English. Our listeners understand this struggle deeply. You cannot just listen to one deep dive and speak fluently. You have to practice regularly, just like Jack practices his guitar chords.
Exactly. Consistency is everything.
Yeah.
The conversation then naturally shifts from mental hobbies to physical ones, specifically exercise. And here we see another stark contrast in how they manage their energy.
Emma is very upfront and admits that she absolutely does not exercise in the evening. She tells Jack that by the time 6 p.m. rolls around, she is simply too physically and mentally tired from her job.
I feel that.
This is an incredibly common feeling. The 9-to-5 workday leaves a massive portion of the population feeling completely exhausted. The thought of running on a treadmill after sitting in meetings all day is just too much for her.
But Jack operates differently. He tells Emma that he goes to the gym to work out 3 times a week. But the crucial detail, the secret to his success, really, is when he goes to the gym.
The timing is everything.
He tells her that he usually goes right after work. He leaves the office and drives directly to the gym. He does not go home first.
That ties back to the wardrobe shift we discussed.
Exactly. If Jack went home and put on those incredibly comfortable sweatpants, he would probably never find the motivation to take them off, put on gym clothes, and leave the house again. Going straight from the office requires immense discipline, but Jack says it ultimately makes him feel much better.
Emma is actually quite impressed by this and spontaneously suggests that maybe they could go to the gym together sometime to help motivate her.
That is a wonderful example of making a spontaneous social plan. But even with Jack's guitar practice and his gym routine and Emma's reality TV shows, there's one specific activity that completely dominates both of their evenings. It is what we might call the ultimate modern phone trap.
The phone trap. This is perhaps the most painfully honest part of their entire transcript.
Jack asks Emma a very direct question. How much time do you think you spend looking at your phone every day?
Emma doesn't try to hide it. She answers, too much, honestly. Probably 3 or 4 hours a day.
3 or 4 hours.
And Jack immediately admits that he is in the exact same boat. He says, I'm always on my phone. It's a bad habit.
What is truly fascinating here is how self-aware they both are. They both explicitly recognize that this behavior is a problem, yet they struggle to stop it.
Emma tells Jack that she genuinely tries to put her phone away in the evening, perhaps leaving it in another room, but she finds it incredibly difficult because modern social media is engineered to be addictive.
They list the apps that consume their time, and it is the universal modern lineup. Scrolling through Instagram, watching endless YouTube videos, and occasionally getting lost on TikTok.
Jack adds that he also spends a lot of time constantly checking the news and reading various articles on his phone screen right before he tries to go to sleep.
And reading articles on a bright screen right before bed leads us perfectly into the final phase of their day, the bedtime battles.
Jack brings up the topic of sleep schedules. He states that his goal is to be in bed, ready to sleep by 11 p.m.
But does he make it?
Just like so many of us, he confesses that he frequently fails to meet this goal. He admits that sometimes he ends up staying awake until midnight.
The phrasal verb stay up is crucial vocabulary here. In everyday English, to stay up means to remain awake past your normal, intended, or healthy bedtime. You are intentionally resisting sleep.
Emma completely relates to this struggle. She laughs and says, "I always say I'll sleep early, but then I don't." And the reason she gives for staying up is the perfect summary of the digital age. There's always one more video to watch or one more thing to do.
Just one more video. Those are famous last words. You tell yourself it will only be 5 minutes and suddenly an hour has passed.
Time just vanishes.
It does. But eventually, the exhaustion wins, and they do actually prepare for sleep. Their final end-of-day routine is very standard and relatable. They go to the bathroom, brush their teeth, wash their faces, and then, inevitably, check their phones one final time before turning off the lamp.
It is the final ritual of the day. But what is truly humorous and slightly chaotic is how they discuss preparing for the next morning. They talk about setting their alarms.
Anna says she sets her alarm clock for the next morning and goes to sleep. But Jack confesses that he sets 3 separate alarms, 3 different times.
When Emma asks him why on earth he needs 3 alarms, he admits that he does it out of a deep fear of the snooze button. He says, "I don't trust myself. I hit snooze too many times."
Let's make sure our intermediate learners fully grasp the concept of the snooze button because it is a massive part of daily culture. The snooze button is a feature on your digital alarm clock or your smartphone.
When the alarm starts ringing and wakes you up, you can hit the snooze button to silence the alarm for just a few minutes, usually 5 or 9 minutes, allowing you to fall back into a tiny brief sleep before it rings again.
Jack is saying that he hits this button repeatedly. He keeps silencing the alarm to sleep for 5 more minutes, over and over. So to ensure he actually gets out of bed at 6:30 a.m., he has to set 3 completely separate alarms to force himself awake.
Emma finds this absolutely hilarious. She only sets one single alarm because she is naturally good at waking up when she needs to. But, as she points out, she is terrible at forcing herself to go to sleep on time. As Jack philosophically concludes, we all have our problems.
That really is the perfect conclusion to their Monday through Friday routines. They survive the week with their coffee, their meetings, and their multiple alarms. But as their conversation shifts, they remind us that the rules completely change when Saturday arrives. This introduces us to the weekend shift, the routines of Saturday and Sunday.
The weekend is a completely different landscape. Let's look at how their Saturday mornings begin. Emma says that the very first thing she does on Saturday is sleep in.
For our listeners learning these everyday phrases, to sleep in is a very important idiom. It does not mean to oversleep by accident because you missed your alarm. It means to intentionally, deliberately choose to sleep much later than your usual weekday wake-up time.
Emma, who usually wakes up at 7 a.m., allows herself to sleep in until 9 or even 10 a.m. on Saturdays.
Jack's Saturday morning experience is completely different, and it is actually a source of mild frustration for him. He tells Emma that he desperately wishes he could sleep in like she does, but he can't.
He says he always wakes up early, usually right around his normal 6:30 a.m. time, even on weekends when he doesn't have an alarm set. His internal body clock is so accustomed to the routine that it wakes him up automatically.
He finds it annoying to be awake while the rest of the world is sleeping. But Emma tries to help him look at the bright side, pointing out that waking up early means he mathematically has more usable hours in his weekend.
And what exactly do they do with those extra hours?
Well, they both experience what I like to call the chore day phenomenon.
Oh, chore day. Both Emma and Jack utilize a large portion of their Saturday to tackle what Emma accurately describes as all the boring stuff.
The boring stuff is the perfect way to describe it. They dedicate several hours, usually on Saturday morning or early afternoon, to completing household maintenance. They talk about doing loads of laundry, cleaning their apartments, and going grocery shopping for the upcoming week. Jack takes a very pragmatic view of this. He says, it's not fun, but it has to be done. The strategy here is crucial. By forcing themselves to do all these unpleasant chores on Saturday morning, they effectively get them out of the way. This frees up the entire rest of the weekend so they can actually relax without guilt.
It is the strategy of front-loading the misery. Once those chores are finally finished and the apartment is clean, the true weekend can begin. The transcript shows a fascinating comparison of how they choose to spend that newly freed up time.
For Saturday afternoon and evening, Emma is looking for entertainment and social connection. She likes to leave her apartment, go out with her friends, maybe get dinner, or go to a theater to watch a movie.
Jack, staying true to his preference for a quieter lifestyle, usually opts to stay home and relax in his apartment on Saturday afternoon. When the conversation turns to Saturday night activities, they find some common ground. They both agree that neither of them are big party people.
Jack mentions that he might go out to a bar or a social event maybe once or twice a month, but generally, he vastly prefers having quiet nights at home. Emma agrees with him, noting that while going out occasionally is fun, it's good to have balance. She doesn't want to exhaust herself over the weekend and ruin her Monday.
Balance is absolutely key to surviving modern life. And then, after Saturday is over, comes Sunday. In their conversation, Sunday is elevated to an almost sacred status. It is described as the ultimate day of peace.
Jack refers to it specifically as his relaxation day. He intentionally avoids making big plans. He spends the day reading books, watching television, or taking the time to cook a really nice elaborate meal. Emma completely validates this approach, stating simply, Sundays should be peaceful.
That desire for a peaceful Sunday is a direct reaction to the chaotic, busy schedule of the Monday to Friday work week. However, maintaining a peaceful life actually requires a significant amount of background organization. This brings us to a major theme in their conversation: life administration.
This covers all the invisible work of being an adult, managing household chores, executing grocery strategies, and handling personal finances.
Let's unpack how they handle those household responsibilities first, because it is a very common scenario. As we discussed, Emma lives with a roommate. To ensure that the apartment stays clean and that neither of them feels like they are doing all the work, they use a highly organized system. They share a physical cleaning schedule that is attached right to the front of their refrigerator.
Putting a schedule on the fridge is a classic universal strategy for people sharing a living space. It keeps expectations clear and avoids arguments. Emma explains how they divide the labor on this schedule.
Yeah.
One week, Emma is responsible for scrubbing the bathroom and vacuuming the floors in the living room. Meanwhile, her roommate is responsible for deep cleaning the kitchen and maintaining her own bedroom.
They usually execute this schedule simultaneously once a week on Saturday morning.
It sounds like a very fair communicative system. Jack, because he lives alone, obviously doesn't need a schedule on his fridge to negotiate with himself. But he is what I would call an intense solo cleaner.
Intense is the right word. He tells Emma that he cleans his entire apartment every single Sunday, and he dedicates a full 2 hours to the process. He scrubs everything top to bottom: the bathroom, the kitchen, the bedroom, the living room floors.
He explains that he simply likes his living environment to be extremely clean. Emma is quite impressed by this, but she honestly admits that she is not nearly as thorough as he is.
For our learners, when you describe someone as thorough, it means they do a task with intense attention to every single detail, leaving nothing incomplete or dirty.
Jack's thoroughness extends beyond just cleaning his floors. The conversation naturally transitions into how they manage their food supplies. What are their grocery strategies?
Emma describes herself as a strict planner. She goes grocery shopping exactly once a week, usually on Sunday afternoon, to prepare for the work week. Crucially, she sits down and writes out a detailed list before she ever leaves the house.
She tells Jack that this is a smart approach because planning ahead prevents her from wandering around the store buying random things she doesn't need. She shops at a local supermarket that is conveniently located near her apartment.
Jack's strategy is the exact opposite. He admits that he is a very spontaneous shopper. He doesn't make lists, and he ends up going to the grocery store twice a week because he doesn't plan his meals well in advance.
But there is a fascinating contradiction in Jack's behavior. While he is disorganized about when he shops, he is incredibly dedicated to the quality of what he buys. He actually tells Emma that he visits 2 completely different grocery stores during his trips.
He goes to one large supermarket for all his regular items like pasta and cleaning supplies, and then he drives to a completely different specialized market just to buy his fresh vegetables.
Emma immediately calls that out for what it is. She says, that's dedication. Going out of your way to visit 2 different stores, dealing with 2 different parking lots and 2 different checkout lines just for better vegetables requires significant extra time and effort.
From the logistics of buying groceries, their conversation flows naturally into the logistics of paying for them. Jack asks Emma a very direct question about money management. Does she use a budget?
Emma's answer is very relatable. She says that she does track her spending, but she isn't obsessively strict about every single coffee she buys. To help her, she relies on technology. She uses a budgeting app on her smartphone. She explains that having this app automatically track her purchases helps her stay aware of her habits and allows her to save a little bit of money every month.
Saving money becomes a major focal point of this section. They start comparing their financial savings goals, and we see another clear personality difference. Jack is highly disciplined with his finances. He tells Emma that his goal is to save a massive 20% of his total income every single month.
When she asks what he is saving for, he explains his specific financial goal. He wants to buy a brand new car, and he calculates that it will take him about 2 more years of saving 20% to achieve that.
Emma is audibly shocked by that 20% figure. She thinks that is an incredibly high amount to save. She admits that she manages to save maybe 10% of her income, and that is only if she is lucky that month.
Her financial goal is also much more short-term and experiential. Rather than a car, she is saving up to take a vacation next year, possibly a trip to Europe. She seems a bit self-conscious that her savings rate is only half of Jack's.
But this is where Jack offers some genuinely excellent supportive wisdom. He doesn't judge her 10%. Instead, he tells Emma, every little bit helps. The important thing is to save something.
For our listeners trying to grasp natural English, every little bit helps is a wonderful, highly common idiom. It means that even incredibly small actions, or very small amounts of money, still contribute positively to a larger ultimate goal. You don't have to be perfect, and you don't have to save 20%. Even saving 5% is a step in the right direction. It's a very encouraging philosophy.
Every little bit helps. I think we could apply that phrase to learning English too. Every 10 minutes of listening helps.
Okay, as we move through their conversation, we arrive at a really beautiful part of their daily lives. We are looking at human connection and personal care. How do they maintain their relationships, and how do they physically take care of themselves?
Let's start with how they connect with their families. Jack mentions that he has a routine of calling his parents once a week, and he usually schedules this call for Sunday evening, perhaps during that peaceful relaxation time we discussed earlier.
Emma, however, feels the need to connect with her family much more frequently. She tells Jack that she calls her mom at least twice a week, and sometimes even more often if she has news to share.
And there is a really specific detail regarding the technology they use for these calls. Jack asks Emma if she uses video calls, like FaceTime or Zoom, or if she just makes standard voice calls.
Emma says she almost exclusively uses video calls because she genuinely likes to be able to see her mom's face while they talk. Jack completely agrees with this preference. He points out that using video makes the interaction feel significantly more personal and connected than just hearing a voice through a speaker.
Beyond their immediate family, they also discuss how they manage to stay connected with their broader circle of friends amidst their busy 9-to-5 schedules. They both rely heavily on daily group chats.
For context, a group chat is an ongoing text message conversation on a phone app that includes multiple people at the exact same time. It is a continuous, low-pressure stream of communication. Emma explains that participating in these group chats is fun and provides a way to stay connected to her friends' daily lives, even on days when everyone is simply too busy to actually talk on the phone.
Group chats are great for sharing a quick joke or a photo, but texting alone isn't enough to sustain a deep friendship. They also discuss the logistics of making social plans to actually meet people in the real world.
Both Emma and Jack say they try to meet up with friends face-to-face about once or twice a week, usually grabbing a table at a local coffee shop or getting dinner at a restaurant. Jack makes a very poignant observation here. He says, face-to-face time is important. Staring at screens all day makes actual human presence vital.
But when it comes to the actual mechanics of organizing these face-to-face meetings, we see their personality differences emerge once again. Jack, the man who sets 3 alarms and saves 20% of his income, likes to make his social plans well in advance.
The phrase in advance means deciding the details of an event days or even weeks before it actually happens. He likes his calendar to be set and predictable. Emma, true to form, is much more spontaneous. She tells Jack that she sometimes texts a friend in the morning and decides to meet up for coffee that exact same afternoon.
I love that spontaneous energy. It keeps life exciting. For maintaining social health, their conversation takes an intimate turn toward physical self-care rituals. Jack asks Emma if she follows a specific skincare routine.
Emma laughs and says not really. She admits her routine is incredibly basic. She just washes her face quickly with water and soap in the morning and does the same thing at night before bed.
What is genuinely surprising in this exchange is that Jack is actually the one with the highly dedicated, complex skincare regimen. He tells Emma that he has a whole routine involving multiple different cosmetic products, cleansers, moisturizers, serums.
He calculates that it takes him about 10 full minutes every morning and another 15 minutes every night to complete the process. When Emma acts surprised, he simply explains that he finds the physical routine of it to be very relaxing. Emma concedes that she is highly impressed by his dedication to his skin.
They also briefly discuss another aspect of personal maintenance, haircuts. Jack mentions that he gets his haircut strictly every 6 weeks. He goes to a small local barbershop right near his apartment, and he always goes to the exact same barber. He likes the consistency.
Emma's approach is different. She goes to a larger, more expensive downtown salon, but she only goes once every 3 months.
This prompts a brief but very relatable conversation about the financial reality of personal care. Jack mentions that paying for haircuts every 6 weeks feels expensive, but he also points out an economic observation. Men's haircuts at a local barber are generally significantly cheaper than women's haircuts at a downtown salon.
Emma forcefully agrees with this observation. She says, "That's not fair, but it's true. It is a small moment of bonding over the annoying, unavoidable expenses of daily life."
The final aspect of personal care they discuss is how they physically relax their bodies when they are feeling overwhelmed by stress. Emma shares that when she has had a terrible week, her ultimate solution is to draw a hot bath and sit in the water for a long time. She might do this once a week just to let the physical tension melt away.
Jack, on the other hand, doesn't take baths. He tells Emma that he takes very long showers when he needs to decompress. But what is truly fascinating is the specific psychological reason he gives for why he loves the shower.
He tells her that he doesn't just use it to get clean. He uses the shower as a distraction-free mental space. He stands in the hot water and uses that time to think about his day, process his emotions, or mentally plan his upcoming schedule. As he perfectly articulates, the shower is a good place for thinking. No distractions.
It is probably the only place left in the modern world where you absolutely cannot look at a glowing smartphone screen. The water forces you to disconnect. Now, as we look back over the entirety of Emma and Jack's day, from the morning alarms to the evening showers, we can see how richly their conversation is layered with specific, vital English phrases.
That is exactly the value of analyzing a conversation like this. Throughout their dialogue, Emma and Jack naturally utilize several core vocabulary words that are absolutely essential for any intermediate learner who wants to talk about their own daily life with fluency. Let's look at how these key concepts anchor their experiences.
The most foundational concept of their entire discussion is the idea of a routine. Everything we've talked about, from Jack waking up at 6:30 a.m. to Emma watching reality TV, is part of a routine.
Yes, a routine is essentially a fixed sequence of actions that you perform regularly, usually in the exact same way and at the exact same time. It provides structure. You can have multiple routines layered throughout your day. You have a morning routine to get you out the door, an evening routine to help you sleep, or, as Jack mentioned when discussing his gym habits, a workout routine to keep you healthy. It is the framework of daily life.
And unfortunately, a major part of maintaining that daily framework involves dealing with a chore. When Emma and Jack were discussing their Saturday mornings, the concept of a chore was central to their dread.
A chore is a fantastic, necessary English word. It refers specifically to a household task that must be done but that nobody genuinely enjoys doing. It is the mundane maintenance of living. Washing your dirty dishes, doing loads of laundry, vacuuming the carpet, or taking the garbage out to the street. These are all chores. Emma captured the burden of this perfectly when she complained that doing chores takes her about 2 solid hours every single weekend.
But once those chores are finally finished, you earn the right to unwind. We talked about how Emma feels the absolute need to unwind the moment she changes into her sweatpants after work.
Unwind is perhaps one of the most visually descriptive words we've covered today. To unwind means to intentionally relax and release the psychological and physical tension that has built up after a stressful period. If you imagine a spring or a spool of thread that has been wound up incredibly tight until it is ready to snap, to unwind is to slowly loosen that tension. Watching television, taking a hot bath, or reading a book are all methods people use to unwind before bed.
However, sometimes life is too busy to unwind or even to do basic things. That is when you might have to skip something. Emma talked about this early in the morning when she explained her breakfast habits.
To skip an activity means to intentionally pass over it, or consciously decide not to participate in something that you normally would or should do. Emma skips breakfast because she chooses to prioritize sleep and coffee over cooking. But you can skip many things. Jack gave a great example of this regarding his fitness when he admitted, "I skip the gym when I'm too tired after work." It is an active choice to miss an event.
On the other hand, sometimes the best moments in life aren't planned or skipped. They are spontaneous. This word came up perfectly when we contrasted Jack's rigid scheduling with Emma's social life.
Doing something spontaneously is the complete opposite of doing something in advance. It means acting naturally and suddenly based on a feeling in the moment without any prior planning or organization. When Emma texts a friend at noon to meet for coffee at 1 p.m., that is a spontaneous plan. She also used this word beautifully when she declared, "I prefer spontaneous weekend tricks instead of planning everything." It implies a sense of freedom and flexibility.
While spontaneity is fun for weekends, it is terrible for grocery shopping. Which brings us to the concept of meal prep. When Jack talked about trying to eat healthy and Emma talked about going to the supermarket on Sundays, they were dancing around this idea.
Meal prep is a highly common modern compound term, short for meal preparation. It describes the specific strategy of cooking a large quantity of food ahead of time, usually on a Sunday, to feed yourself for the rest of the busy work week. Instead of cooking every single night, you spend 3 hours on Sunday cooking massive amounts of chicken, rice, and vegetables, and then divide them into plastic containers for Monday through Friday. It is a highly efficient way to save time, save money, and avoid the temptation of ordering unhealthy fast food when you are too exhausted to cook.
But to successfully execute 3 hours of meal prep on a Sunday requires the final, perhaps most important concept we saw today: dedication. Jack's entire lifestyle seems built around this word.
Dedication, or the verb form to dedicate, means to give your time, your physical energy, and your intense mental commitment to a specific goal or task, even when it is difficult or inconvenient. Jack demonstrates immense dedication throughout the transcript. He shows dedication by practicing his guitar multiple times a week for 6 months. He shows dedication by waking up at 6:30 a.m. every day. And as Emma pointed out, he shows serious dedication by driving to a completely separate grocery store just to purchase higher quality vegetables. It is the commitment to a standard.
Routine, chore, unwind, skip, spontaneous, meal prep, dedication.
When we take a step back and look at the amazing journey we just took through Emma and Jack's day, we can see how these concepts build the reality of human existence. We went from the painful ringing of that 6:30 a.m. alarm clock, or 3 alarms if you don't trust yourself, all the way through the rush of the commute, the meetings of the 9 to 5 grind, the relief of the evening wardrobe shift, and the final scroll on the smartphone before sleep. By analyzing these deeply relatable everyday habits, we uncovered the natural, practical English that textbooks often ignore. The transcript from the Leo English podcast offered one final, brilliant piece of advice for anyone listening who wants to master this language. They suggested that you should practice by talking to yourself in English about your own day. When you are standing in your kitchen making coffee tomorrow morning, think to yourself, "This is my morning routine. I am doing this first thing." When you are reluctantly folding your laundry on Saturday, explicitly tell yourself, "I am doing my chores."
That is incredible advice. It forces your brain to connect the English vocabulary directly to your physical, tactile reality. The words become memories, not just definitions on a page. And to help you start making those direct connections right now, we want to leave you with a final provocative thought. It is the exact question of the day that Emma and Jack posed to each other at the end of their conversation.
We want you to seriously think about your own life right now. Look at your entire day from waking up to falling asleep. What is your absolute favorite part of your daily routine? Is it that peaceful, quiet moment early in the morning? Maybe you are drinking a hot cup of coffee on your balcony, feeling the cool air, and watching the city slowly wake up before the emails and the stress of the day begin.
Or is your favorite part completely different? Is it that glorious relieving moment at 6 p.m. when you finally return home, unlock your front door, take off your heavy work shoes, put on your most comfortable sweatpants, and know deep in your bones that the workday is officially over and you can finally unwind?
Take a moment to think about what your favorite specific moment is. Close your eyes and picture it. Now, the challenge. How would you describe the sounds, the physical feelings, and the specific actions of that favorite moment using the English language? Use the everyday vocabulary we explored today. Dedicate just 5 minutes to describing it to yourself.
Let the language become a part of how you unwind. Thank you so incredibly much for spending your valuable time with us on this academic English AI deep dive. We hope you feel more confident to talk about your beautiful, normal, everyday life. Keep learning, keep practicing, and we will talk to you next time.